and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which means 6 thoughts about reading, writing, or somehow related to storytelling. So it took me a little extra time to think of my 6 things this week. It's been a long week, but I do have them ready for you, so let's get started. Number 1, I wanted to share that yesterday I finally got my print copies of Eleftheria, and I was so excited because actually while I've had some readers receive their copies, because if you just buy it as a consumer, you can get it with Amazon Prime shipping. So some other people have seen theirs before I got to see it, but I unpacked them last night and they look wonderful, and I got to put it up on the shelf with the other 6 books and just see them all lined up, and it just looks great up there with all the rest of them. So that was pretty exciting, and I have a few copies available now, so anybody wanting signed copies can feel free to let me know. But yeah, it turned out really nice, and I'm really glad for that. Number 2, I've been working daily on the editing for Humanoid. And if you're familiar with my editing process at all, because I have talked about it on here a few times, but you'll know that the first stage for me is printing it out, ink and paper, putting in a binder, and going through with a red pencil and marking it all up. So that's what I'm doing right now. I've made it not quite halfway through, but I think pretty close. So that's good. I think that's good progress. There are definitely a lot of changes needing to be made, but most of that is the big plot changes that are going to cause me to need to completely rewrite the last few chapters. And then, of course, that reflects on some other things that are said or happen earlier on in the book. So lots of big things like that. And then, of course, also just things where I wrote the wrong name or forgot to put quotation marks, and then also things sort of in between those two where it's like maybe 1 second it was morning and then it was afternoon all of a sudden, or just things like that. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done on it, but I do think that it's coming together really well, so I will keep you updated. Number 3, I thought I would share that I made the decision not to do NaNoWriMo this year, National Novel Writing Month. I was originally intending to do it, and I had picked out my story, which is a book I have been wanting to write for years and years. And I was super excited to do that. But the last couple weeks, I've just been looking at my schedule and all the things I'm working on, and I'm having all this momentum on the Firmament series. And I just completely wrote a whole book in the last, month and a half. And I just decided that adding on Nano was going to be too much right now. Plus, on top of that, we are going to be out of town for a week, or out of state actually. We're taking our kids to Disney World, which is going to be amazing. Of course, it's a wonderful place to take kids anyway, but my girls in particular are obsessed with Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, so I think it's going to be such an amazing time. But I do not want to worry about writing while we're there, and I don't want to try to catch up after we get back. So this is not going to be the year for it. Hopefully next year, and I still really want to try to get this particular book written, so maybe next year will be the year for that. And I'm sad, but I also definitely feel like it's the right decision. Oh, number 4, this was just a cute thing that happened. Y'all know that I love to share book-related cute anecdotes about my kids. So we had my sister and her husband and their 2 kids were in town last night, and so they came over. And Violet, my oldest, was super excited, and she was just talking to them, playing with them, super cute, super sweet the whole time. And then toward the end, she went and got this little early reader Frozen book that she has, and she can't read, but she loves books and loves to look at them and, make up the stories. And so she brought out the book, and she stood in front of all of us that were adults that were sitting around in the living room, and she goes, "Would you guys like me to read you a story?" And so of course we're all like, "Yes, go ahead, we want to hear." So she sits down and starts making this little story to go along with the pictures, and every time she would open it, turn the page, look at the page, say whatever she wanted to say, and then turn it facing us so we could all see the pictures. And it was just so sweet. And so yes, as usual, it just also reminded me how excited she is going to be when she can actually read the stories, and I'm sure she will want to actually read them to us when the time comes. Number 5 on my currently reading, I'm still continuing through my read of the Mary Russell and Sherlock Holmes series by Laurie R. King. I've mentioned several of the books in that series on this podcast, so you may remember that there have been quite a few in the series that have not been my favorite, that just were not really grabbing me, but this one has been, I would say. So the first book in the series is just one of my favorite books. I love it. But other than that one, this one might be either my favorite in the series so far or very close to the top. And this is book 11 or 12, I think. I don't even remember. There's a lot of them. So anyway, I do have slightly mixed feelings about it because I feel that it's very well written. It gets you right into the action, which one thing I don't like about some of the books is I feel like they kind of drag, especially the first half, and this one does not do that at all. She really pulls you forward with the mystery and what's going on, and the characterization is good. It just flows great. It's very interesting. I'm very curious, enjoying reading it. My one thing, and I don't even know if I do or don't like this or both, so I don't think it's a spoiler to say that in this book she delves into the backstory of Mrs. Hudson, the one-time landlady and now housekeeper of Sherlock Holmes from the original books. So of course she's a beloved literary character from a long time, back when the original Sir Arthur Conan Doyle stories were published. And so in this, Laurie R. King, explores her version of Mrs. Hudson's background. And I'm torn because I haven't read or seen anyone else do that, and I think it was a great idea, and I think she did it well in the sense that it's very compelling and interesting and well written. But it's definitely one of those everything you ever thought you knew was a total lie kind of things, and I'm not the biggest fan of that strategy, especially when it comes to a reboot or long past sequel, whatever you would call something like this, where it's someone working off of someone else's beloved work. I don't know, it just kind of doesn't quite sit right with me, where you're just you're kind of it feels to me like basically undermining everything that's already been done with this character, which granted is not much. She obviously doesn't play the biggest role in the original Sherlock Holmes stories. She plays a slightly bigger role in this series, the Mary Russell Sherlock Holmes series, but still not huge. You've never really known anything about her. And I'm fine with like I said, exploring her background, but the way they did it, while interesting, does make it out where basically literally every other time you've seen or known about Mrs. Hudson, it was like I said, a complete lie. And I don't know. I can't decide how I feel about that. I'm enjoying the book. It's not enough to make me not like the book, but it just kind of gives me an uncomfortable feeling. I don't know how to explain it. I just rubs me the wrong way a little bit, I guess, but I am really liking the book overall. So number 6, this is maybe a little bit of a weird one. I was struggling to come up with a 6th thing this morning, to be honest, and the thought I kept returning to, which I don't know how much I actually have to say about it, but So I mentioned last week that I'm reading Randy Alcorn's book on heaven, and I just a day or two ago read a chapter where, as he's talking about what our life on the new earth will look like, in eternity and all that, he's answering sort of specific questions that people have commonly. And some of the questions did relate to writing and books and hobbies in general, and will we have those in, the new earth? And his theory is that we will have all of that. And as with a lot of the questions he sort of sets out to answer, he said he'll state, we don't know exactly how this will look or what it will be. Scripture doesn't tell us completely, but we do have a few certain principles about the new earth that for him cause him to believe that it is very likely that we will continue our hobbies and our knowledge and things like that from this earth, and yet in a way that is completely, of course, without sin or corruption. And so he believes that we will still be writing books and have books there and all of that. And I was thinking a lot about that because for me, it's easier for me to imagine other hobbies carrying over. Like, we obviously know there will be music because that is mentioned in the Bible. And I could envision someone still, drawing, painting, making things out of wood. Like, he even mentions, imagine building a cabinet with Joseph or with Jesus himself. Like, he was a carpenter. So I could envision all that more easily than I could envision writing. And some writing more than others. So for instance, writing a theological treatise or poetry about the glory of God, like that I could definitely see. But when it comes to stories and fiction, I was sort of struggling to envision how that would work because, as we know, what makes a good story is the conflict. And there is generally, in most stories, some sort of battle between good and evil. And whether or not that would be acceptable on the new earth is something I have been thinking quite a bit about ever since I read those chapters in the Heaven book. And it's made me consider, at first, I was thinking that seemed unlikely. Like, would that be, in a sense, bringing conflict or sin into the new earth? But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, we obviously won't be taking any taking any pleasure in anything that is wrong or sinful or, like I said, corrupt or anything like that. So we would not ever find enjoyment in any part of a story that did reflect anything sinful. However, I do definitely believe, and he goes into this a lot in the book, that we will still remember and be aware of the stories from our past and from earth, and especially the greatest story of all time, which is the triumph of Christ over sin at the cross, which is itself, of course, a story of the most intense and immense battle between good and evil that has ever happened. And we will be praising him for that story. So we will have stories there, true ones for sure, that include elements of evil that we just will take no pleasure in them, but it will cause us instead to glory and rejoice in the victory of good and the victory of the Lord. And so it just kind of made me wonder, like, would that not also be possible in a fictional story? Would we not also be able to tell a creative story that includes elements, but that they're coming from such a pure heart and a pure mind that we could do it in a perfect way and portray a perfect reflection of the victory of good in a story? And still, I can't envision exactly what that would look like. And of course, I can't say with 100% that clarity that would be true. And there is no way for us to know. But I do think that as long as we're not committing actual heresy, as long as we're not